Hello, everybody. This is the Affordable Housing Commission meeting for today, and I want to always start out my meetings by talking about what our real mission is, because there's some confusion about what the Affordable Housing Commission actually is. So, the Athens City Affordable Housing Commission is a commission of city government established to review best practices, investigate community affordable housing models, and identify needs and opportunities within Athens city limits to advance decent, safe, sustainable, affordable housing for all city residents. The commission is tasked with providing advice and guidance on measures and policies that influence access to and needs within the local housing market. So I want to be clear that this is not just about low-income housing, though of course that's an important part of the housing needs in the community. We also want to be sensitive to people with disabilities, worker housing, executive housing, essentially housing for everybody who needs it, and so that we are being truly inclusive and careful with our housing choices here. Okay, with that, the first thing we do is establish quorum, and we definitely have quorum. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody being here. The next is the disposition of minutes, which I sent out to everyone. I did make one change on the minutes that you sent me, but I believe you have all of the corrected one, and that is I added that Kimberly Francis did resign, so we are one person short, and we're going to need to deal with that, so she was not at the last meeting. But otherwise, good job, as usual. Thank you very much, everybody who did that. Okay, now we come to our main focus for today, and that is our speaker, Joe Recchi. He's the CEO of Praxia Partners, and he's going to talk about updates on the Ridges and also the Welcome Home Athens project. You're doing both. Thank you very much. Okay, so are you comfortable with having questions asked while you're speaking, or would you prefer we wait to the end?
Questions anytime are fine.
Okay, because we have people with various interests in the audience, and I want them to feel comfortable, and you feel comfortable too. Okay, take it away, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. And can everybody hear me? Okay, I need to project more. All right.
Okay.
It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm anxious to present an update on the Ridges and also talk about how it might be integrated with the grant program that we've worked hard to develop with the City of Athens, the Welcome Home program, initiated by the Ohio Department of Development. But starting with the Ridges, I have fresh news because we just got approval from the State Controlling Board yesterday afternoon for the transfer of the Ridges property to a combination of Ohio University and the new community authority and the developer, including the historic campus, which includes what we know of the Ridges as the Ridges. That's all of these properties. So on the historic campus, as well as select parcels for development, which I'll describe in a bit, for new development, primarily for housing, or exclusively for housing for the new development. I won't spend time on the arduous process of going through with the university and the Department of Administrative Services and ultimately the Controlling Board how to gain approval for what is a pretty unique structure. The transfer of property by governor's deed past the stewardship of Ohio University, but including that and into the private sector in a public-private sector partnership. That process was eye-opening, but it was really well conducted by all the parties. There was a lot of good questions from the Department of Administrative Services, touring of the community, recognition of housing needs, including the housing study that we sponsored in preparation for the development of the Ridges plan, and that encompassed all of the housing needs of the community. So it was a recognition, as you described in your introduction, of how significant and compelling this issue is. So the Department of Administrative Services understood that, understood the community, went through all the legal requirements of delivering the land and getting all the approval from statewide, because not everybody's as enthusiastic about Athens as people in Athens are, and they have to understand that this is significant for everybody. So that's what happened yesterday. That takes us to the starting gate, which is once deeds are prepared and transferred, the Ridge's new community authority is empowered to proceed, and we can go through the next arduous process, which is planning and zoning, because all of this is currently zoned for educational or scientific purposes, and we need to use it for other purposes. So going through that planning and zoning process to gain entitlements to move forward is also really important. To kind of refresh your memories, or for those of you who are not following the details of this, there is a planned improvement of the existing site, and all these numbered those are the numbered buildings. Just to summarize, everything that's in green is currently used by Ohio University, has been improved by Ohio University, and will continue to be used by Ohio University. So the idea is to just knit together other uses for the property that match up with the existing academic and research uses at the university. Then there's a second category, and I don't know if you can see well from the color coding. There are a number of parcels that are kind of orange colored that are, no, I'm sorry, there are a number of parcels that are used by the university but would be available for development in the future. And we have to provide them 3 years' notice of our desire. They're subject to they're transferred, but they're subject to a dollar lease, net lease. They continue to use it, the print shop, the other components, with a 3-year advance notice when we need that property, so they can find another location for their desired use. Then there are a couple parcels that can only be transferred or only given up by Ohio University if they find a replacement use. So that's a little bit more, the print shop's an example of that. That's a working building. They've got a lot of uses there. They're not going to vacate that building. They are transferring it, but they're not going to vacate that building until they find another place for it. So that's something that there's some question marks. Then the remainder of the site, the vast majority of the site, will be subject to a conservation easement, which under Ohio law, they can only grant for 25 years, just like all other easements, but the intention is to leave that in perpetuity, so it'll be renewed just like utility easements and roadway easements and things that come up on a tickler that would be renewed over a period of time. That's the understanding of the university. That's what's been represented, and I think that's the expectation of City Council, which unanimously supported this combination plan. I want to turn to new construction because this is these sites, which you're familiar with. They ring the historic campus. If you look at A3, that's the current A3 is at the top of the site, is just a portion of it is owned by the university. A portion of it is subject to an option. That's the old softball diamond or baseball diamond. A1 and A2 are along Dairy Lane. They're small parcels, but they include that ranch structure that's just adjacent to city property where the miniature golf is. Then A1 is not too far from the dairy barn, but it's along Dairy Lane. Dairy Lane was selected because of ease of development, that is relative ease of development. There are public streets, there's new infrastructure, the infrastructure needs customers, so that's part of the combination of the service department and utilities and just thinking about how to generate activity at the site. There are townhomes that are possible along those sites. They haven't been designed, but they have to be planned and zoned. A4, 5, and 6 are also on the historic site and or adjacent to the historic site, and those are planned for home ownership housing as well. So we're trying to focus on the new development on home ownership to the extent possible. Then there are later stages that are shown C1 and C2, I'd call those a second stage because it has limited access to it right now. The access would come from a connection on Carriage Hill Drive because there's utilities and a public street that come up there, and there's sufficient capacity with the utilities because that's part of the integration, is figuring out how to deliver housing where you're not burdening the city with additional utility expenses or creating an added expense for connections. So that area off of Carriage Hill Drive, there's sort of a ridge top, and it drops down. You can see by the topography there's pretty severe drop off into what is part of the conservation easement, but there's the opportunity to do additional housing up there.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
So, two things. Are you showing these in the order in which you think there will be built, or
Sort of.
sort of?
Yeah, so going back to that, Dairy Lane, I think, is the first development site. And
Okay.
I'll go back to that when I talk about Welcome Home, but I think that for new development, that is a first site that could be developed because it's adjacent, it's on the public road, there's new
Right.
infrastructure. There is obviously site work that needs to be done, but that's kind of an easy fit. So yes, it would start there. It would probably conclude on this C1 and C2 because we still would have to figure out how to get access to the site. There's another means of access up to Dairy Lane
Right.
along that easement that was
Right.
created for the utilities, but that's got a fair amount of cost associated with it, so it's hard to, it's something that can be done, but it can't be done immediately.
So another question is, there's supposed to be a supportive housing piece that would be behind,
Yes.
across from Dairy Lane by the other,
The 317 board.
Yeah, the 317 board.
So that, thank you for mentioning that. That's not on this. It actually is below the A1 parcel where it says townhomes. If you just, because the 317 board operates just beyond that site, and there's 2.9 acres that was designated for the 317 board for their continued housing development. So just a continuation of what they have. We're working with the 317 board. They, on a separate track, going through the capital appropriations budget, have earmarked funding from the state to help support that. So we're meeting with them because their site control is important. So this transfer that was approved yesterday that the 317 board would use for their permanent supportive housing.
Okay.
And I think supportive housing.
Okay.
And I think that speaks to what you were saying initially. It was like all housing needs, including special needs for housing. It's like, how do we accomplish that and hold the whole? And how do we do that in a way that's sensitive to all the parties, including those interested in the conservation easement, those interested in historic preservation, and concerns for the site. So that's not shown on this map, but it is a parcel that is being transferred that would be to the benefit of the 317 board. We are helping the 317 board in a development advisory capacity to help them lock all these pieces together, tie in the infrastructure, and get development that matches their needs.
Great.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You had mentioned the easement, the utility easement with the dairy barn.
No, not the dairy barn, but a utility easement. You can actually see it on this map. That's the green. That's a utility easement that was reserved for the city of Athens so they could connect their sanitary connection and water.
And so it is not the one that the dairy barn has for AEP currently?
Correct. It doesn't connect to that. But it does connect to Dairy Lane. So that's another way
Okay.
into this site. Though difficult, it is a way to get to the site to make use of it in the event that we can't gain access through carriage lane. And then the utility tie-in would be there.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, when the road, Dairy Lane, was torn up and they did all of the infrastructure with in mind that there would be more building along there. So that's taken care of.
So part of that consideration, to speak to the thinking about infrastructure, is when that capital improvement is made, then they have to figure out how many customers do they have. Does this make room for new customers? Does that support the retirement of debt? So this fits hand in glove with the public sector's infrastructure development plans so that there are users at the site that can pay for those to help retire the debt on the improvements that are made, so we don't strand it. And that's part of the purpose of using the C1 and C2 site is there's been an investment by the city in establishing that infrastructure connection. They'd like to make use of that and get some customers from it. It's also a portion of the site that doesn't really touch the rest of the conservation easement. It's up there by the summit, so it's connected to that parcel. Sadly, there was an easement or a right to use that road from the summit, but I don't think that was recorded, so it probably didn't run with the transfer of the property. But I think the intention was, once that road is built and that land was transferred, that there'd be access to that later site. But the way it's structured now, there's at least one way in and then possibly two ways. I want to do the development summary here, which is talking about the historic site too, because among the many uses would be affordable senior housing and proposed in buildings 2, 3, and 4. So that'd be a pretty sizable affordable housing community with supportive services for seniors. That could also be mixed income. There's possible, when you're using tax exempt bonds, you can designate the amount that you want to obtain credits for and how those units will be rent restricted, and then you'd have other ones introduced. So you can mix the income to meet a broader band of interested parties for the senior housing. There's also the desire to use the same financing structure for artist live-work units. So being able to, I know there's like a term, capitation, it sounds scary, but how you keep people that are already here. So if you have OU graduates in the arts or in some creative field, and they have affordable housing that meets their needs, that has a zoning designation or a zoning variance that allows live-work space, that encourages a certain critical mass of creative folks that might want to live in the community. We think that is a way to enliven the site. It's also a way to assure intergenerational connection. That would be rental housing as well. And that's in the historic building. Those are secondary buildings. If I go back to this portion, what you see in the purple, they're 5, 6, and 7, sort of the back side of the front of the site. Those buildings could be repurposed as affordable live-work units. And those buildings are service buildings, so they're not really laid out exactly like dormitories, so that the irregularity of it might actually serve in a live-work environment a little better and create some opportunities. So that's also part of the plan. Then the for-sale housing is really at all price points. Well, not all price points, but building 24 is probably, that's that doctor's building. It's a 12,000 square foot. It's falling down. Now the dormer has caved in, so the roof needs substantial repair. It's also fenced off because of environmental concerns. So that building repurposed would be fantastic condominiums and probably be at a high price point. I don't know who that buyer is, but maybe an OU alumni that wants to be a part of this, but it would lay out really nicely for 6 condominiums. So I'd say if I were looking at high-end housing, of all the units, maybe those 6 would be at the high end of the market. We try to fit as much as we can in that middle ground as possible. The market study says that's where the need is, right in that middle. So working households that want to become homeowners, try to make room for them in any way we can. So that's the goal.
So I'm going to ask about that building 24 you just mentioned, because I told you some time ago that I do know some people who are interested in having the exact kind of condos or whatever that you described, and you said that possibly that could be something that could be done early because it's totally separate from everything else.
That's a good point. It's finite. I mean, the building 2, 3, and 4, that is that teal colored or light blue color, those 3 connecting wings are over 100,000 square feet. So it's an enormous lift. It's also a really big expense. So you're talking about $40+ million project to lift that off the ground. Building 24, as you mentioned, is 12,000 square feet. It's 12% of the size. It's 6 users. So we've done projects before where 6 users get together, design the unit they want. They're the buyers. We deliver that to them. So we get a construction loan tied to a permanent loan, just deliver that. So that's a historic adaptive reuse. As owners, they're probably not using the historic credit, but we are committed to, under our condominium documents, committed to observing the historic preservation guidelines on the exteriors, regardless of whether we're using the tax credits or not, just to make sure that when it all comes together, somebody had asked about, what would the historic campus look like when it's renovated, and I said, the intention would be that it would look pretty much the way it looked like when it was operational, because you have a lot of historic fabric there, and if you can bring it back, you have an elegant site plan as it is, and I'll go to that in a minute, but that building could be an early start and could become iconic because the repurposing of that building might invite or induce other investors to make commitments on larger buildings further down the line.
Let's talk about that later.
The further down the line?
Yeah. Sooner rather than later, yeah.
Oh, okay, see what you mean. Yes.
I just have a quick question. You mentioned a housing study and a market study. Is that available as a summary or something to
The
the
whole
public?
thing is
The whole
available,
thing is
yeah.
available. Okay, where is that available?
Well, we have it on a share file. We delivered it
Okay.
to the city council and to Ohio University, but
Okay.
we can deliver that to your, do you have a website that has material? Yeah, we can, we
It's on the
can
city,
add that.
yeah.
It's
And-
slightly dated, but it is.
Yeah, when was that done?
It was done about 23 months ago.
Okay,
So it's not, it's, the circumstances have not changed. Prices have changed,
Okay.
income has changed, but
Thank you.
the need probably is almost exactly where it was demarcated.
great.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Christian, we make note of that. Christian Hickman's with me. He's also a resident of Athens, so it's easy for him to come to meetings, but he can follow up by getting that on over to you to put on your website. Other questions before I move on? So I have to watch the time. You'll have to, Solveig knows I'll talk forever, so you just have to stop me. I did want to talk a little about a further integration. The entire historic campus, this historic campus, is being submitted into a condominium declaration with the county. So that's been carefully worked out with the city, with through the Attorney General's office, with the attorneys who are authored it, and we put it together. So the idea of the condominium association was we didn't want to disturb the land use plan. And if we say, put this into a PUD, in order to transfer properties, we'd have to have connection to we'd have a legal parcel connected to a public road. Well, if you try to introduce public roads into this, you completely disrupt the land use plan, and it becomes really complicated. So the way to resolve that was the creation of a condominium association so that each building is a condominium unit. And that is the way in which Ohio University successfully interacts with the rest of the community in the operation of the site. So they can continue to be what they are and what they continue to do, and we can make room for various forms of financing that would come together to create the remainder of it. To further complicate it, that's the big master condominium, and then within each building, if it is a condominium, for instance, that building 24 that we just talked about, that would be its own condominium association that would have 6 members. And it is a member, that building is a member of the whole condominium association that has both OU and our development in it. So they become voting members of the whole, if you think of it like a big homeowner association, and then they have a little homeowner association that represents their ownership of that building. And all that has to be integrated. So there's a lot of background work to make that work and make sure that complied with the Department of Administrative Services, the university's expectations, and the controlling board. So that's been accomplished. It hasn't been filed yet. It will be filed along with the deeds when those deeds are prepared and it's transferred, but that'll happen yet this summer. And that's sort of the starting gate for the ability to proceed on multiple parcels simultaneously. So in summary, with our development summaries, our intention was maintain the conserved land for recreation and public use. So I think we've got that, and the actual wording of the conservation easement is something that will be figured out with a baseline that's established by the Conservancy and then filed by the university. So how that will be stewarded, and the new community authority will be part of that stewardship, although it won't be involved in the ownership, but certainly as a participant in the overall community, vitally interested in maintaining that conservation easement. Leveraging vacant space and developable land to meet market housing needs, that's a significant component of what we're doing. Create opportunities for flexible commercial space or mixed-use experience, that, like the artist live work units. There's some limited retail. We think there'd be a nice couple of restaurant sites, in particular those 2 octagonal cafeterias, if you recall, if you're familiar with the site, the back of those sites, those would be wonderful gathering spaces. They're gorgeous. They're in disrepair, but their original design was to provide dignity and honor to the residents in a humane environment, and that suits the purposes of a retail or restaurant facility really well. To complement Ohio University's presence as an anchor in this community, but also as a regional anchor that might attract investment and home ownership or housing from the region. And then build on what investment has already been made by Ohio University.
So before you go to Welcome Home, everyone's curious how much time we're going to have here. I mean, like, how soon do you think we could get to, because you talked about zoning issues and filing papers and da-da-da. So is there a chance that, like, the Dairy Lane townhomes or condos or wherever they're going to be, could that be done a year or two from now? I mean, how does it look realistically? Or Building 24 or something? And I'm concerned about the historic sites where the roofs are, open and they're a mess. So we need to get to those real soon. So I'm just concerned about how that timing is going to work.
Well, thank you for the question. I am too, because those are pretty big issues. The physical deterioration of the historic buildings is really weighs on everybody because the cost goes up as the buildings continue to deteriorate. All of them will have to go through that rezoning process to initiate anything. A lot of this is not linear. So, for instance, zoning has to be in place by the time you submit for, say, federal low-income housing tax credits. Mm-hmm. But all of the preparation for that submission can be done simultaneously with going through the zoning process. So those things converge at a certain date. But starting with and I do want to talk about Welcome Home because that actually is the potential to lead off on some new housing development, start with affordable home ownership on Dairy Lane. So that might be a first order of business, was to get the ball rolling to generate a tax base that helps support infrastructure development, including historic preservation, but also to meet a specific grant need that exists today because with grants been awarded so we can proceed. The planning and zoning process, my guess is we're going building plot by plot. So we'd start with both the historic campus, trying to find a solution for that, where we have integrated mixed-use development into existing zoning structure. In the past, we've used a large zoning variance, which doesn't make common sense. It sounds like, well, why would you do a big zoning variance? That's a rezone. But instead of like going in through the whole zoning charter, it's actually better to create a sort of form-based variance that says, okay, this is the building. Within this envelope, we've got these designated uses that integrate into the development plan or the framework. You're good on that. If you want anything else, come back and rezone it. So that would be a chance to maybe take the whole site and figure out what would be an appropriate variance that applies the necessary controls and is an expression of what's already been put out in the public as the framework. Then on the individual sites, it's been recommended by the city that we maybe take that through a PUD process. So along Dairy Lane, perhaps get approval to do, I think along there's maybe 56 townhomes. We could do maybe 10 or 12 of those under the Welcome Home program, but have a design that we could just continue to, so we'd be marketing market rate units as well as affordable units that are subject to this Welcome Home subsidy that I'll describe in a moment. So you're actually absorbing faster. You're actually working on two tiers: market rate housing and similar housing, but which would have subsidies and restrictive covenants associated with them. So that's a chance to move forward. So going back to your calendar, I would say once the property is transferred, or even now before the transfer, but with the approval of the controlling board and subject to the support of the university, we could come in, start the zoning application process. University is the current owner, but we know where it's going. So like share in that, we do the work, present it, and start that process of iteration with the city to figure out that zoning. And we'd start with the big historic site plus Dairy Lane to see how we can get a start. The timeline for that, I don't know. I would say it realistically in 2025, we could get Dairy Lane zoned, and if there's support for a large-scale zoning variance, get that completed, and then immediately go to construction of affordable housing on Dairy Lane. By immediate, that would mean the beginning of 2026. The units that we have designed, and I'll describe it in a minute, is they're prefabricated units, so they turn quickly. It's about 105-day total development from the time we start till the time it's delivered to a home buyer. And that's even including 2 to 3 weeks for the transition from completion to home ownership, because nobody can turn on a dime, so you got to give a homeowner a chance to close and get in. So that's the time frame, and we think that, so that would be early 2026 construction at the site with people living on Dairy Lane by the second quarter of 2026. During which time, if zoning is in place, we can start to assemble all of the other requirements to compete for funding on the historic site, which includes the use of historic credits, state historic credits if it does not involve housing, federal credits even if it does involve housing, and low-income housing tax credits in some mixed-use combination. So that's the strategy. The overall timeline is 10 to 15 years. So we're not talking about a quick process. Of course, because you've lived through it, you know nothing on this is quick. It's gone slow, slower than I would want, but faster than the potential, which was stagnation. So just knowing that the alternatives. I will add the additive to that is we're in an environment that has significant headwinds on funding. I mean, you just need to read the news to know that the Section 8 program is questioned, the home program, which is subsidy for affordable housing, that is on the chopping block. The National Housing Trust funding is on the chopping block. The defunding of HUD, defunding of the Department of Interior, even the processing for programs that have legislation and are not being challenged, the ability to get things done where you get approvals, that whole thing is bogged down. We see that in every other area of work that we're doing. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the tariffs' impact on construction. I'm concerned about the challenge to immigration that is affecting the workforce in construction, which, as we all know, is a very significant part of our workforce, and part of the supply chain. It brings the materials, everything that we need into development. So I'm staying up at night on these things. It's really significant, but I also feel like this is a long-term project, and so we figure what things can go forward now, what things will go slower because of these circumstances, and how that will be resolved. The good news with Welcome Home is it's a state-funded program. It doesn't involve the federal government. It is popular. It's a new program. The City of Athens got in early on it and got a grant. It's $2 million. It's enough to do up to, the grant requirement is to do 8 units. But the plan is to recycle those funds in a very frugal fashion and get as many as 18 to 20 units out of it, which is the way we proposed it to the state. The state loved the stewardship model, which is getting more with less. And so I think that approach could be really good. Again, because it doesn't involve the federal government, that money is not being questioned. It's actually they're re-upping the program in the current state budget and actually increasing funding because they see it as popular, especially in small communities. So if I can, I'm probably spending too much time on this, but quickly on the Welcome Home program, the city requested with us a $2 million grant. We got it. We actually asked for more. They gave us $2 million. And the approach is to try to do up to 20 units. Finding the right sites in the city of Athens, as you know, is very challenging, just like every other housing need. There are a few sites. We've looked at several of them. We think we can do about half those units, approximately half, within the existing city of Athens on vacant parcels or parcels that are available at low cost to try to deliver units. And then because of the timing, we're actually in a good shape to try to use about half of the grant, maybe the second half of the grant for 8 to 10 units on Dairy Lane to do affordable home ownership. The way the program works in summary is this describes the parcels. I'm giving you the website, so I'm going to spend time on it now. But these are the units being built currently. These are 1,300 square foot homes. This is an example of a detached home with a wraparound porch. 1,300 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, full basement, finishable basement, but we're not finishing it because we're trying to keep that price point low. The target price is $160,000 for the home buyer, which means the target mortgage payment is about $990 a month, which, knowing what the rental housing is in Athens, that's ownership at less than rental for the same unit. And it's a brand new unit with a warranty, high energy efficiency heat pumps. It's an all-electric unit. It's solar ready, which maybe means nothing because the legislation calls for canceling the residential tax credit, including if you're trying to do it for low, moderate income homeowners, which we are currently piloting in the city of Columbus, and we'd hope to use with Welcome Home. We'll see how the legislation turns out, but right now it looks like it'll be solar ready without solar until the homeowner has their own funds to do solar. But that's the overall plan. There are variations of this plan: detached homes, attached houses like a duplex. They can be ganged up into 3 or 4 units. There are variations of a row house. We have designs of all these with Unibuilt, our selected prefabricated builder. So these are modules that get brought to the site, craned into place, then we do all the other finishes at the site. The advantage is they can build 365 days a year in a controlled environment. They have a statewide permit for these plans, which we developed with Unibuilt and got approved for 88 counties. So the same thing we're building in Sandusky or Ashtabula, we can build in Athens, or a variation of it that fits the architecture of the area. So there's a lot of advantages of it. The housing type itself can be embellished. You can make them bigger. You can make them fancier interiors. You can change the facades, but then they can be market rate housing. It'll be a higher price point, but you can deliver a lot of different aesthetics using a common module structure in a very efficient fashion. So that's the plan for Welcome Home, and Dairy Lane is one of those locations we'd like to do it. The grant is in place. It's already been awarded. The city has it. We're finalizing our critical path for development. We will, of course, now with the controlling board's action, we're able to incorporate on our timeline the Ridges site along with those other sites. I probably overstayed my welcome. I'm happy to answer questions. Again, this is the little detail. We'll do a little marketing. These units are fantastic for families. They include a first floor bedroom with a first floor accessible bathroom for intergenerational families that might have a member that has a disability, a bonus room. If they don't need it as a bedroom, it's a great family room. So just having that ability to age in place, the ability to finish the lower levels. You get this lower level, the basement, is almost 800 square feet. So you can easily make a big extra bedroom or a rec room or something out of that. It could be a DIY project that adds a lot of value. We can even show folks how to do it. There's financial literacy required with the program, so we're doing that. There's income qualification, which we do. The bank does the minimum that is required to get a mortgage to pre-qualify. We do the income certification to make sure that the homeowner is at 80% of median income or lower, because that's a requirement under the grant. And then there's a deed restriction that's filed with the property that makes sure that it doesn't just get churned or turned into rental housing and the people move away. It's really a dedication to affordable housing for 20 years. So good way to look at it is there's $100,000 or so of benefit to a homeowner. It sounds like a giveaway, but it's actually, the designation is for the house. You get to live in the house and you get the benefit. When you no longer need the house, pass it to somebody else that's income qualified. They need a lift too. So if you think about it, you're introducing affordable home ownership for the next 20 years in the city of Athens. I think that's a pretty good strategy. So with that, happy to answer questions. Yes?
You mentioned some tax-exempt bonds. I'm just wondering if you've given thought to who would issue those bonds and if you would work with local partners like the Port Authority.
So the tax-exempt bonds could be issued by the county. They can be issued by the Ohio Housing Finance Agency. They actually can be issued by the new community authority. It has the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds. So there's a number of ways to go. It seems that the Ohio Housing Finance Agency likes the projects that they fund or provide allocation of credits. They like it to go through their system as the issuer. They charge for it, so maybe it's I don't know how they do their finances, but I imagine they capture it because it pays their bills. So those are the various approaches. We've done all those before. We've done the new community authority route. We've done the Port Authority or the county, and also the Ohio Housing Finance Agency.
Seems like a big enough project that there might be room for everybody.
Truly, there is. There are a lot of component pieces of that, and the complexity of it is dazzling. To fully use the historic credit, for instance, the historic building is owned by one group of investors, and then it's leased to the folks that are doing the low-income housing, because then they tap all of the credits. So those programs are very elaborate to try to make full use of it. But in a site like this, you need to pull out all the stops. It's like you got to do everything. to make it work. So that makes it more challenging and potentially more rewarding.
So any other questions?
I have a quick question. Maybe it's not a quick question.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've been following some of the city council meetings lately about rezoning, and that sounds like there's a lot of rezoning that's going to need to happen.
Yeah.
A lot of people have come out and expressed concerns and their opinions about rezoning. I just wonder, what are some talking points for, we obviously need housing. I'm sure the market study and the housing study will show that. Just what are some, and maybe this is a conversation for later, but I would be interested in how we can present this to the community about the benefit to our community for this in a kind of a positive light. I know that's maybe a big hairy question, but
Well, it's a big question, and I'm sitting with it too because I have to
Yeah.
present it. So
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
in the most favorable light. But I guess I would focus on first, it's equitable development. So it
Great.
is not monolithic. It is not a short term. Nobody's scoring on this. It's not like you're coming in, grabbing the money, getting out of town, and somebody lives with the result. Because it's a long term project, they're building blocks. Each thing, just as we were talking about Building 24, that could become iconic and help inspire maybe a retailer or a restaurant to say, hey, I'm going to do that high quality work on one of those buildings. I'm going to own that building. I'm going to proceed with it. So you hope for a virtuous cycle, one that is supported economically and also aesthetically. So the equitable development part of it is one part of it. The second part of it is you're building a tax base. Admittedly, in the short term, with the new community authority, we're needing that tax base to pay for infrastructure and what the NCA calls community facilities. So that's anything that is supporting the community goes into that. Ultimately, though, that devolves into part of the tax base of the city of Athens and the school system. So the big beneficiaries long-term, coming from 150 years of tax exemption, is a significant tax base. We calculated that the taxes delivered to the city school system as the tax increment financing and tax abatement rolls off is more than $1 million a year. And they're not giving up current taxes to do it. We're just basically bootstrapping from tax exempt status to a taxable status with a base. So in terms of community development and making a livable community, supporting the city and supporting the school system is really significant. So I would focus on that economic part of it. And then on the equitable development part, we're trying to do housing at everything from permanent supportive housing for a special needs population to potentially luxury housing, and including folks that have not been included, like the artist live work units, thinking that has a regional economic development generation while delivering for the community in a way that uplifts it and supports Ohio University. So we're trying to, again, the virtuous cycle part of it, there should be a good in this for everybody.
wonderful, thank you.
We'll see how that turns out. We'll have to make another public meeting or a series of them.
Well, sounds really great. There's, of course, a million other things we could talk about with this, but I think we need to move on. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thanks for all the hard work you did and so many other people did on this. I think Andrew Chicky's here. Probably he's been part of this. And Jim Kaufman's here from Ohio University, and he's certainly been in some ways part of this and will be in the future, which we appreciate. So this is
I'm
very
glad
exciting.
you put it that way, because it absolutely is. It takes an entire village, and this community has all of the resources that it needed to bring it from a theory into a practice plan. So
Okay.
thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, we didn't ask people like, anybody else want to ask a question out there? Oh, why don't you go find him? To the press. Go find him. All right, so, well, we don't have a lot of time left, and I think I don't like to go over, but because we're going to be out in July, I think we all agreed on that, right? We're okay with being out in July? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that means that we won't have another full meeting until August, and let's check the date on that, just so we get that right. So that would be the 19th. All right. right, great. Okay, let's just quickly go through a few things here. I wanted to talk about the resolution, but I think I'm going to just say that I sent you all, as per your request, one version that would be just internal, and we wouldn't have to go to City Council at all, and another version that would be going to City Council. And I guess I have mixed feelings about which is the way to go, and some comments from other folks as we evolve with this process gives me some pause about how to move forward most expeditiously. My preference would be to wait until August, because we can't do anything in July anyway. So, and I'd like to have a few meetings with stakeholders about this before we make any final decisions. So can we, anybody want to move for that? Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Comments?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, do you want
Would you like
to?
a motion?
Yes, please.
I would move that in August that the committee take up the resolution and at that time make a decision.
Okay. And in the meantime, we'll see if we can find out, get some stakeholder meetings together to further inform the best way to go with this. Okay? All right, can we get a second on that and then a vote?
I'll second.
Okay. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The nays? Okay, we're good. All right, good. And that'll give you a chance to really think about what you think is best. Look it over really carefully in terms of, the process, the whereases, what we might do to make it the most effective, and also who needs to be represented, because that's important, obviously, too. Okay, so let's move on to city updates. Megan, is there anything you want to, because you had your town halls, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so I hosted a public meeting last Wednesday to discuss a potential rezoning that the Planning Commission has been discussing for the past couple of months. The whole discussion was rooted around the reutilization of the city's old fire station headquarters. And while the Planning Commission was looking at the zoning map for that area, just noticed that a lot of the existing land uses do not match with the current zoning designations. So we have been discussing how to rezone that entire area to best represent what is currently there and also kind of set structures in place for future growth. And we hosted the meeting last month to hear directly from the neighbors. Had a really good turnout, about 50 people attended, and had some really good engagement and input received. So we'll be continuing that conversation with the Planning Commission from here. Those meetings are public, and the public is welcome to attend. We don't have a formal public hearing like we do when council hosts theirs, but there is always opportunity for public comment on the discussion items. During the meeting, I did host a sign-up sheet, so if other members who are not able to attend the meeting are interested in receiving further communications via email, they can reach out to my office and I'll add them to the distribution list. I've not sent an email out yet, but hopefully soon to just clarify the next steps and just thank everyone for their participation. So,
Great, that's wonderful that you're doing that. That makes it very transparent and community-oriented. If you wouldn't mind putting the Affordable Housing Commission on the list
Sure.
of who should get notification, that would be really helpful, I think. I think it's an important piece of what we're doing going forward, and I applaud Megan for the work she's doing on this, these kinds of projects. I wanted to mention, is there anything else, or should I?
I think that's all I've got.
I just wanted to bring everybody up to date on what's happening with the HAPCAP project. As many of you know, there was $2 million additional dollars after they, purchased the Sunset Motel. There's $2 million additional dollars to really make this a completed project, which is great. And they're doing the work to try to find out what's the best way to go and the design work and all that, but it's moving along very quickly, and I really am impressed with all the work that's been done. In addition to that, HAPCAP and a number of other community organizations and individuals and the Athens County Foundation had a sort of a town hall kind of focus group thing recently to ask just general questions about housing needs. And I don't have the results of that yet, but we should get that soon. And that probably had, I think, maybe 50 people as well, approximately. I'm not very good at counting that out, but something like that. And it was very general, like what kinds of housing do we need, and not specifically about insecurity or whatnot. But of course, those things came out. Questions like, what do you think are important with housing? So that's a new conversation that I think is important for us to get the results of as a commission and see how we can work with HAPCAP on certain projects and find out what we're doing. By the way, they are open to putting things in their newsletter, the HAPCAP newsletter, that we might want to feed to the community. So as we move forward with some projects or issues or ideas, feel free to contact them, and we can discuss that in detail more later. So I think those are some great things. We're hoping that the whole project with sheltering and whatnot is moving along pretty well. There's a lot of different pieces of that, and that's really exciting for our community. Shay, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I wasn't I was out of town at the latest BZA meeting, so I don't have any updates from that.
Well, it looks like you're going to have some things to look at, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that should keep you busy for a while.
I think it will.
All right.
I
Other
did
than
think
that,
of one more. The zone change for 111 Hooper Street, so that's the affordable housing project, did get approved. I just wanted this body to know that it got approved by council two Mondays ago?
yeah, I wasn't there, so.
That's for the Light Tech project, right?
Yes.
Well, it was the 9th, because I wasn't there then. Okay,
have they
that's
been
great.
awarded
Thank you for
that
mentioning.
LIHTC funding, or are they still competing for it?
I'd have to double check, I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Well, that's their goal, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, okay, the nominating committee is going to have to get together and talk about moving forward because we have Kimberly Francis left, so we could talk about that when you have a chance, maybe over July, to think about that. The new development committee didn't have a meeting, so is there anything there that we want to talk about?
No, we just didn't have any updates today.
Okay. And the neighborhood revitalization, we did meet today, and one of the things that I don't really have much time to talk about, but I'd like to present it later on, and that is I went to a conference, the International Town Gown Association Conference, and there were all kinds of great ideas about housing. Too many to really discuss in the next few minutes. And so I think what might be better is if the group that went to the conference is going to meet tomorrow, and we're going to talk about what kinds of things were helpful and what we might be able to use going forward. So I think it would be helpful to maybe go through and sort of summarize, what kinds of things really would be best, and I can send that all out to you to look at. Some of the best ideas, I thought, and we did talk about this, in our meeting beforehand, was, for example, having an organization like one, well, not just one, but many communities are doing, and that's having a subsidy, essentially, to allow people who are coming into the community to put a down payment on a home. And this would be like a grant sort of thing. And it would be, you'd have to, similar to some of the things that Joe talked about, you'd have to stay there for a given period of time. You couldn't turn it into a rental. And if you left before that given period of time, then you'd have to pay some or all of that money back. But it would be, in one case, it was $15,000. That's helpful. And it would not be income exclusive, at least not the ones that they did. But there's lots of different models out there. It's been discussed in the past here, and I think it's time we talk about it again. Other projects.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
About the people who went? Was it people from the city and the university?
Yes.
Great. So
Yes.
there was both represented.
Including
town and
Megan.
gown. Great.
Including Megan.
Wonderful.
So we'll talk tomorrow. Great. Anyway, we always want to encourage the university and the city and the community to work collaboratively and
Right.
productively together. And I think there's some real opportunities with that, with the housing issue. And so there's several ideas, other things that I'd like to find out more about, because I don't know exactly what we're doing with off-campus housing here, but lots of transparency in terms of options for rentals, more education about responsibilities for landlords as well as for renters. Student renters often don't really know what their responsibilities are or how to be a good renter. So lots of opportunities along those lines. Again, until I find out more, I don't want to presume what's being done or what's not being done. But they also, some of these universities do a study of where all the students are living, and then they can make all kinds of decisions about services, transportation, where there's food needed, mental health services perhaps, all kinds of things. So those could conceivably be something if we have more information. Another one that I really liked was the housing assessment tool. And this is something that was done, this was done in Kansas, but it's a free tool to determine, it's called a self-assessment guide for communities to gather and analyze data on their housing inventory, partner with relevant stakeholders, and develop priorities for local housing investment. Communities can use this tool to make data-driven decisions in addressing housing investment opportunities, and that is particularly good for rural communities, by the way. And they use students to do this, so it could be one of those experiential projects where the students go out and they have all these details, and they go out to the neighborhoods and they walk around and look at stuff and do all kinds of things. Anyway, I thought that might be an interesting, and they said it was particularly good for getting grants because the tool was so helpful in terms of figuring out what the needs were, that when they applied for grants for whatever, they could use that as part of the, application. So there's that. And again, lots of not only qualitative or quantitative, but also qualitative studies from about how the students, in this case again, off-campus housing, how they're doing and what kinds of barriers there are for rentals and whatnot. Again, this could be a student project or part of another committee project. So another big project for Habitat for Humanity. I'd love to see them do more stuff. There's amazing things going on out there. So anyway, lots of exciting stuff that we can talk more about in detail as I figure out what the university is interested in doing and what we're already doing and kind of get a sense of that. So anyway, I think that's all I have for now. All right, anybody have anything you want to bring up, talk about? Anybody out there want to bring something up? All right, well, guess what? It is now 12:58.
Wow.
I think we did a good job. We've been pretty good about getting that hour long. So anyway, there's lots of cool things happening out there. We're doing a lot of good stuff. I think that we have some great things to look forward to. So thanks, everybody. So anybody want to have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay. Anybody want a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Everybody's okay with adjourning? All right, let's go. Okay, I'm looking forward to lunch.
My GH.
Yep.